Hi guys, good evening. It's Friday, and Fridays it's gin and tonic time. It's 8 p.m. in the UK, which means we're going to be talking about Islam for the next 2 hours or so. And as per usual, I'm going to say hi to the other members of the panel, which are Rob and Thunder. Thunder's making himself some tea. I don't know if he's back yet. Hello, Rob. How are you doing this week?
Good evening to yourself, Stops. Good evening, Thunderous, and good evening to all the viewers. Been a busy week, but come to the end of it now, and I'm sure we can have some interesting discussions tonight.
Yeah.
Hi all, welcome to the panel, everyone that's listening, and hello to my co-panelists, Stops and Robs. Good to speak to you guys after a pretty hectic week. So, time to relax, time to have some interesting discussion, and time to have fun.
Yes, that's the way. But it's quite funny when you're really trying to get something done, because I've been sitting over the videos of Subur from SC Dawah because I'm trying to take them down a notch, and I'm getting like 5 minutes and somebody will call, and then the whole drive is gone. Then you need to start from scratch. Then you get into the zone again, and then somebody else calls, and it's always gone. And then I have to go there, and I have to do this. It's so terrible when real life and work and things like that, take you off your hobby. That's terrible. I think that's really horrible. All right. Ladies, gents, and others, it's the Gin and Tonic Show. We do a couple of things. We go and introduce ourselves and tell people what we are not. Then we're going to go through some news. We're going to read a little bit in the Quran. And we're going to be addressing the theme of the month, which this month is Dawah in action. So we're going to look at what people are doing, how they're doing, looking at some of the tactics and looking at the types of different approaches that they're using. And then we're going to go, and if anybody has any questions, this is the time then, after the theme of the month, to go and ask if there is anything open. And then we're going to close with the hadith of the week. And if this is not enough Islam for you, you can then come and chat to us on the Discord channel, which is not recorded. All right, so there you can just talk and speak your mind. This is just an informal exchange platform that we've created there. Okay, we are the Gin and Tonic Show, and we talk about Islam, and we are not in any way restricting free speech. We are not restricting participation. We are not a Dawah channel. We are not a Muslim Dawah channel. Here you can come and talk to us. We are accessible. We will talk to you. We will not cut you off, shut you off, or in any way just mute you and kick you out and censor you and kick you out. No, this doesn't happen here. We're very open. We're available here, and we listen to arguments. And if anybody has a good argument, we will even change our minds. Welcome to the chat. This is one of the possibilities that you can interact. So in other words, you go to YouTube, you go to Facebook, and when we are on the live stream, you can go interact with us. So if you want to comment, if you want to correct, if you want to question, go ahead. Here you can do it. If you also want to address us personally, or you want to lecture us on something, provide us with information, you have the possibility of joining the panel. We've got somebody in 3 weeks who is going to show us or provide us some information on what happened after the Shia and Sunni divide. So we're going to be looking at history a little bit after, I think, after Abu Bakr, Uthman, somewhere around there, and then see what happened there. So that should be quite interesting. So if you have something like this, go ahead, talk to us, and you'll be given a platform. And please, just because you're a Muslim does not mean you don't have a platform here. If you are a Muslim and you have a specific topic that you want to address, go ahead. We are open to that. So if you want to say something, you can have your say. We will not interrupt you. We will not kick you off. It doesn't matter. We'll just discuss it afterwards. And I think that's a very realistic and very grown-up attitude. I think so, at least. So the way that we do it is we have the third possibility that you can interact, and I've forgotten again to go on last week's episode because I did this on, I think on Monday, but there was not much going on. And then I forgot to do this again. And I want to do this Thursday evening and Friday morning, and I always forget. Anyway, that will be the third way that you could go and watch the show and interact with us, leave messages there. And normally I try and look at them. Thunder actually was quite good for a while because he had some interaction with people there. So that also works. So, any questions, anything open that you want to do, come talk to us. That's it. We talk about the Quran. So in other words, we don't address other ideologies or religions or anything. We try and focus on Islam. And the thing is, we don't believe that in any way talking bad about Hinduism or Zoroastrianism or Rastafarians or something makes Islam any better. It doesn't. So what we do is we let the Quran speak for itself, and then what we do is just go and address those points. All right, the next point on our agenda is that we go and we look at some, at some news. Now, what we need to know is that, I'm sorry that I'm lisping a little bit. I've got a swollen tongue for some odd reason. This is why I have a problem pronouncing some words because the tongue is so big. It's quite strange. And I've tried eating ice cream and things, but that's as good as it's going to get at the moment. Now, Hajj starts on the 28th of July. Okay, so it's only like 2.5 weeks. And instead of up to 3 million, only 1,000 pilgrims will be allowed this year. Now, why God needs people to run around a black stone 7 times is actually unknown. And why this God would then throw in the virus to block this, I also don't know. Last week, I think we talked.
It's all a test.
Yeah, it is a test.
It's all a test. Hey? Whenever we don't know something, it's a test.
How persistent you are.
Allah knows best, or not.
So if you go there and you spend lots of time shoulder to shoulder with lots of people, getting lots of contact, it's them experiencing a lot of SARS-CoV-2 contracting and then going through all the pains and everything of COVID-19. That is a huge test, let me tell you. Okay, but if you're a good Muslim,
yeah, but if you're a good Muslim and you hope that the luck of the draw is on your side because you don't know one way or the other, then you're just potentially you're going to get to heaven quicker, right? If you're a bad Muslim, though, you're going to get to hell quicker. You just don't know. It's a crapshoot.
Yeah, but hang on. If you die immediately and you're a good Muslim, you have a bigger chance of getting to hell quicker because you've got no more chances of doing anything wrong later on in life because you're dead.
Yeah, that would work both ways, right? So if you're a bad Muslim, you're likely to go to hell. If you're a good Muslim, then you're likely that you won't make mistakes and so forth later in life, and might go to heaven. You just can't judge it yourself. Only Allah knows best again. So a bit of a crapshoot. I mean, how does anybody believe this stuff? But I think the threat of hell, or whatever Islamic version, because they have different concepts of it, right, is obviously quite fearful for some Muslims. So that might put them off. But, if you are a good Muslim and you're doing your Hajj and so on, you get corona, well, then you're just going to get to heaven quicker, right? You're not committing suicide. You're doing, what God wants you to do, and it's all a test. And the little bit of pain that you have between getting it and going through that thing for a couple of weeks is, not a big problem for the rest of eternity in some sort of idyllic paradise with women and wine and lakes of milk and so forth, right?
And actually, if you die in Mecca while on Hajj, you get special privileges as well. So
how's that? What special privilege?
Well, you get, I can't remember how many. I think it's 3.5 or even 4,500 points, and you get intercession rights for a limited number of family members, which is a little bit less than if you die as a martyr. So that the martyr is the highest one. If you fight physically for Allah and you get killed, this is the highest level. And then one level below is dying while on Hajj in Mecca.
Are these points transferable?
No, you can't even inherit them.
No, they can't be transferable. I was going to say, because I'd forfeit the points that I've earned with Allah thus far when I was growing up as a Muslim if I could have a moment with Ali Dawah's wife and her breasts to make myself mahram to the family.
You dirty old man. Oh, shit. Okay, the
But I
next
think
topic we
stops
talked about.
most Muslims don't know this, right? Otherwise, they'd all be
Yeah,
flocking
this is
to
correct.
Mecca
Well,
to
and
die
they
when
don't
they're
like
getting
talking
close to their
about it.
deathbed.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Well, that's just it, isn't it? I mean, I don't see why there's any health and safety over in Mecca, because the more people die, the more people are going to go to heaven. I mean, flooding, stampeding, cranes falling over and killing people. They'd want
Uh-huh.
more of that, surely.
Well, if you're a good Muslim, yes, you'd want something to alleviate your test here to get you to heaven quicker. But then again, you just don't know, right?
That probably explains why there's so many martyrdom bombers are so willing to die for Allah.
Well, as you can see, we're not really taking this very seriously, but a lot of Muslims really believe this, and they are adamant that this is what is going to happen and what must happen, and they really go for this. This is for me, for any normal thinking human being, this is unbelievable. Because nobody
But
in their
we've been,
right mind will actually believe this. You need to have a special mindset. You need to have a special outlook. You need to be indoctrinated in a special view to actually go and believe this. And nobody knows this better than Thunderous, because he was brainwashed. And then for some reason he woke up and said, whoa, there's something wrong here. So, yeah.
yeah, I think you're saying that we don't take it seriously, and for us we don't. But the seriousness is, it is quite serious, because there are victims of this in the world as far as the world seems concerned. So whilst we may be making light of it, because it is, as you say, quite absurd that anybody would believe any of this, the facts of the matter is people do believe it, and sadly, the people who do believe it are victims. But then they have outward physical manifestations of their beliefs that affect other people locally and to the greater extent the world in which they live in as well. So it's not to be taken seriously, but it is quite serious, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Well, at the moment, I'm being bombarded by some kids who are sending me Zakir Naik videos, saying, "What, you can't respond to this? That nobody has ever been able to answer this, and the scientific miracles are obvious, and how can you resist them?" And then I'm saying, like, excuse me, I've done this for the last 10 years. They've been refuted, debunked, they've been ridiculed even. So what the hell are you talking about? No, nobody has, and they're totally scientific, and we have scientists who actually go and give us testimony that this is all correct. So it's like, it's like a Groundhog Day. The whole thing over and over and over. And, just when you thought, okay, this has been really refuted now, 10 years later it comes back. It's like fashion. Ah.
Reanimators just mentioned a point there about Allah knows best. On a Muslim who was moaning about the British Empire this week. I told him it was a test and it was written by, you know what, Reanimator, what you just said there, I used to say to my family and local community about foreign policy, because that was the argument I used to use about the Americans and the British and their foreign policy towards the Jews in the Middle East. And I would use that as my argument, as a test for the Muslims. And Allah must be testing the Muslims the most severest, because they're the most impoverished, uneducated, and least contributors to the world as far as the economy is concerned. So if you really want to raise that argument, if Muslims want to raise the argument that it's a test, then Allah is blessing the non-Muslims so much more, infinitely more than he is the Muslim. So, you have to question the sense and morality, decency and logic of Allah, that anybody who supports him or wants to worship him is basically siding with the society that has contributed and received the least in the history of religion.
Yeah, and if Muslims come against that and say, no, actually, it's the suffering that is the test, well, then you would invite more suffering, right? So that you couldn't really argue that the test is supposed to be suffering, because then you'd wish more upon you. In fact, you'd want, the quote-unquote imperialists to invade you and to allow you to suffer more, because presumably that would be better for Allah. So they couldn't use that argument either, could they?
Well, I used to say the Allah's will. It's the will of Allah. I used to say you're moaning about the foreign policy of the Americans and the British in the Middle East. Then you cite Allah's will. Then you cite Allah knows best. So why your argument is basically you're fighting against Allah because Allah's allowing this. Allah's testing. Allah knows all things. Allah knows best. So your moaning about foreign policy is actually a challenge to the sovereignty of the God that you claim to worship. He's allowing this. He's causing it to happen. So who are you to challenge your Allah then? You should be standing back and saying, this is absolutely fantastic. Look how much Allah is testing us and look how much we are, I don't know, standing up to the test. I don't know, whatever way you perceive it. That should be the attitude and rhetoric of the Muslim.
Yeah, but I like the approach of Reanimator, really. I've never tried this. Yeah. Okay, the next item on the news list, this is a bit longer, comes from ADL, and they call themselves a leading anti-hate organization. Now, I don't know what that is. I don't know what an anti-hate organization does, or what they stand for. But they're saying Islamophobes react to coronavirus pandemic with anti-Muslim bigotry. Now, what is, okay, for me, an Islamophobe is an anti-Muslim bigot. So
But that's not an Islamophobe, though, right? You can just say anti-Muslim bigot, or you can just say
Exactly.
Muslim bigot, right? Because that's what it is, right?
So why would they say Islamophobe with anti-Muslim bigotry? For me, that's the same
Well,
thing.
because they can't really define Islamophobe, and it's just a made-up word. So you have to explain what it means, because if you take the straightforward meaning, then that's patently absurd. So you can't go with that. So you've got to add something on and say, well, actually, what I mean by it is this. Why don't you just say that and leave aside the fantasy word and just tell us what you think the claim is, and then prove it, of course. But that you won't see.
So what they write is, as the coronavirus continues to spread, American anti-Muslim ideologues are propagating a range of conspiracies aimed at stoking fear, claiming Muslims are defying social distancing rules and or actively trying to spread the virus. Yeah, but okay, that's true. I mean, I don't quite understand what the point is. So they're saying some of this anti-Muslim propaganda is linked to India, with the international Islamic group Tablighi Jamaat held a meeting just as the virus began spreading throughout the country. The group was deemed a virus super spreader after thousands of conference attendees tested positive. As a result, many Indian politicians and media outlets blamed the country's Muslim population for the widespread outbreak. Okay, including accusing Tablighi Jamaat of engaging in a deliberate conspiracy to spread the virus. Okay, I don't think in this case it was deliberate. There have been instances where Muslims go and try or pretend to, I don't know if this is real or not, try and cough at people to frighten them. But okay, I don't think that here this whole meeting was a deliberate conspiracy. American Islamophobes were quick to pick up on this anti-Muslim propaganda and misinformation. Karan Rebello, deputy editor at Boom, an Indian fact-checking website, told BuzzFeed News that in India the narrative being spread is Muslims will always follow Islamic laws over the rule of law. And the other line of thinking is that Islam wants to punish kafirs, in other words, non-believers, and actively spreading the virus would get rid of them. Okay, all of this is true. So I don't really know what they are crying over.
Well, they've
Because
obviously claiming that
Muslims
it's
will
not
follow
true. and-
Islamic law over the rule of law. So that's a fact.
Well, presumably they want their narrative is that it's not true and people are spreading falsities. But if it is true, then people are spreading the truth.
Okay, so the only thing I think I see that is wrong here is that Tablighi Jamaat had this meeting as a deliberate conspiracy. I don't believe that, because they didn't know about the coronavirus. They were told not to do it. They went ahead anyway because they didn't understand the danger, because they said, well, God is protecting us. I can't remember reading something about this, that they said, yeah, we have the verse in the Quran which will protect us, and it didn't. So there was a huge spike in the Indian statistics due
But
to this one meeting.
weren't you and I talking about the stops, and I think Thunderous as well? This is a falsifiable claim. If the claim is that that you can be immune to the virus, well, then all you have to do is test it. And if it was the case that all Muslims that went to Mecca, and in fact, even if some had corona before they went to Mecca and came back and they were completely cured and there was no interference, then we'd be going, okay, maybe Mecca is the place to go to either get rid of the virus or to ensure you don't get it. So it's an empirical claim that can be confirmed or falsified. And I'm pretty sure it hasn't been confirmed.
And this is exactly it works on the same lines as those Christian denominations that claim to have miracles. It works on that same kind of level, that you come here, it won't affect us because we've been blessed kind of mentality, when the truth is that you can't test it. And the claims that they make are always something that is, how can I say, you can't discern the manifestation of the perceived miracle if it were to take place. Obviously, in this case, no miracle does take place. For instance, I used to suffer, for example, chronic headaches. I went to Mecca and now I don't have headaches anymore. Or I went to Mecca because I went there and Hajj, and Allah blessed me by removing my chronic back pain. It's never a case of I went over to Mecca and he replaced my hand after it got blown up by an improvised explosive device. I went there and he didn't give me the ability to walk again because I suffered polio when I was a young child. It's the same thing with the Christian denominations that proclaim these kind of miracles. It's just working off the same spreadsheet.
Yeah, I think the bigger the miracle, the more it could be confirmed or falsified. The other ones, you've got a naturalistic explanation that is far more likely to be the case. Like you say, if you regrow a limb, we know of no way that can happen naturally for human beings, and that would be pretty extraordinary. Somebody gets over a back pain or something else, people do that all the time. So
the thing is, if it was from God, you'd see prosthetics laying on the floor, not being discarded because there's no use for them anymore.
Guy gets out of his wheelchair and starts walking. Not only like they do in some of the U.S. Faith healing. What do you call these? These not mosques, but church. Well, they're not temples. No, they're not. What do they call these mega churches?
Yeah.
So they claim they do these things, and then they walk for 2 steps, and then they sit back in the wheelchair, and they say, "Yo, you see, I cured them."
Yeah.
Oh goodness, this is funny. All right, then let us go and take a look at the Quran. And we were, I think, here on 89, 90. In other words, they got a book, and if people reject them, we will replace them with others, and they are guided, so follow their guidance. And if anybody wants to read along, this is still in chapter 6, and it's sentence number 91. What I do is I take a sentence, and then I take the essence. I percolate it. And then what I do is I take only the essence of what is left, and I put this in here. Because this gets rid of all the waffling, all the fluff, and all the rest, which is not really that important. So Moses got a book by me, and Rob has just pulled up 691 in a standard Quran translation, and you can see that this is quite a long paragraph, which I put into just 5 words. If you guys, they did not appraise Allah with a true appraisal when they said Allah did not reveal to a human being anything, say who revealed the scripture that Moses brought as a light and guidance to the people. You Jews made into pages disclosing so many concealing much, and you were taught that which you did not know, neither did your fathers. Say Allah revealed it, and then leave them in the empty discourse amusing themselves. This is a lot of stuff. I think Moses got a book by me is much shorter. I really get to start and change.
But the thing is on that book, The thing is, on that book, Allah doesn't seem to want to mention that the book's been corrupted. The Muslims claim the book's corrupted, but Allah doesn't seem to want to say that. So how do the Muslims reconcile that? Allah seems to be confirming the integrity of previous scripture. He's not challenging the integrity of it.
Not here, no. Anyway, so it actually says this in 92. This book is also from me and confirms the previous ones. Now, I don't know what the big story is. Why, if it confirms the previous ones, do you need a third one? This is quite strange. I don't understand that. And here, in this book which we have sent down, bless and confirm what was before, that you may warn the mother of cities and those around it. Those who believe in the hereafter believe it, and they are maintaining their prayers. Okay, great. The mother of cities. We don't know the mother of cities. Some people claim it's Mecca. Some people say it's Medina. Some people say it's Jerusalem. So we don't know. Anyway, so 91, Moses got a book by me, God, signed God. And this book is also from me and confirms the previous ones. And inventing lies about God, I don't know, why doesn't it say about me? I don't understand. Inventing lies about me is the worst, and they will be punished. Now, then I would understand it. Why inventing lies about somebody else, like another God, I don't understand. So any Muslim reading this should already prick up their ears and say, excuse me, what's going on here? There's something wrong. But they don't. So, do you want to go through this? No. 94. Now you come to me without anything I gave you and without your other gods. All right? Now you come to me. You see, it's inventing lies about God. This is another God, and now it's to me. And I gave you something and without your other gods. Well, the other gods don't exist. So if there is only one God, how can you come there without your other gods if they don't exist? 95, God does everything. Why doesn't it say I do everything? Or I can, or I have, or I don't know. And then night is for sleeping, and sun and moon are there to tell the time. So
can we just
why
go back
did we
to
invent
95?
clocks? Sorry, say again?
Can we just on 95, it talks about Allah was one who caused the seed grain and dates to split. But the thing is, see, that's a process. That's not he doesn't cause it to happen. It's a process that's already in existence by the time that Muhammad is writing this. For instance, when you invent the combustion engine and you pour petrol in it and you start the ignition and the ignition ignites the petrol and the petrol produces enough power to force down the pistons to crank the crankshaft. I'm sure that's how an combustion engine works.
Yep.
That is a process. Now, once that process has been invented, every other car that now starts with that process isn't created in that moment every time the engine starts. It is a process that has been invented, then that process is then automatically that the inventor of the engine isn't systematically going around every car starting the engine. He isn't creating or causing it. So this cause, the verbatim here doesn't make sense. The seed sprouting in the ground is a process as a product of germination that's already there. Allah isn't creating it.
But I think this is exactly the point they're making, that this is saying that God is responsible for every single one of those seeds to go and sprout.
If that's the case, if that is the case, then why is it that the non-Muslim world are producing more food than the Muslim world? And why is Allah blessing the harvest of the non-Muslim, the kuffar, the worst of creatures, in comparison to the best of creatures and the arable land that they're supposed to be living in?
So that they can produce the grain, so that the Muslims can eat it and focus on their spirituality.
But they're not eating it, though, are they? They're amongst the most impoverished and malnourished peoples on the planet.
Well, that's why Allah gave them oil, so that they can sell it to the kuffar, so that the kuffar can produce the food that the Muslims eat.
But the Muslims are not eating it, and it's only the very small elite people are getting blessed from the oil, the revenue of the oil that are in those countries. They're supposed to be spreading it down. Who said that? Allah seems to have blessed certainly some families in Saudi Arabia than in these oil-rich countries, because that oil that all those Muslims are sitting on, they're not getting any of the benefits of the proceeds of that oil. or the financial remuneration. And it's not being invested in education, it's not being invested in the healthcare system, and it's not being invested as far as homes are concerned, the industrialization of the countries.
You need to remember that the Arabs need drivers, they need nannies, they need nurseries, they need all sorts of things. So, in other words, they are fueling the economy from up to down. And they are. I mean, the healthcare is actually quite good. I mean, I've been there and I've used it. So I wasn't in any way, under the impression that this was second class or something. Definitely not. It's only when it comes to specialization, then the people go to Europe or go to America or something. But the general purpose stuff, no, they can handle this very well. So, and of course, also with education, they have a lot of varsities, they have a lot of schools. It is starting, but of course, a lot is centered on teaching Islam, obviously. But they do that. Not as much as they could, obviously. That's why the people who are fleeing from Syria don't flee into Saudi Arabia, but they come to Europe. Why is that? This is the question that I'm always
This is
asking
exactly
Muslims, and they have no answer.
Which is my point, like Sudan, for instance, or Yemen, or Pakistan, or Afghanistan, or Iraq, or Indonesia, or all these other countries. They are not getting the revenue that the rich, all Muslim brothers, the Ummah, are benefiting from Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and
Yeah,
Bahrain and such places. They are not giving the wealth to their Muslim brothers and sisters.
yeah. Instead, they're buying the 16th Ferrari or something. Okay, night is for sleeping. Sun and moon are there to tell the time. Is that a true statement?
I mean, but he also says he
Like no
places
one knew that
stars for you.
before.
Yeah.
Sorry, there was
He
both of
places
you
the stars
talking.
for you to be guided, beacons. I mean, that's only if you understand how to read the stars. If you
That's
if you ask the
one
majority of
later.
human beings on the
Rob, that's
planet,
one later.
oh,
Go one
sorry.
back to, we're still on
Oh, I thought
96.
we did
But
96.
it's the
Sorry.
same thing.
Oh, yeah, that's that one.
I mean,
That's
sun and moon for
that's making a trivial
calculation.
statement. And that's a trivial statement there. If he's the creator of everything, then obviously everything is created by him. So telling us the details of some of his creation, what's the point of that? That's just
Yeah.
padding out a book. Because everything is created by him. So you can have one of two views. Either he started the creation, i.e. beginning of the universe, and everything then follows in its natural course, quote unquote, from him, or he's creating in every moment. He's in charge of every particle that is operating at every moment in time. But the problem with that is, of course, that would nullify free will. So it's very difficult to get around that, it seems to me. So you would have to go with the view that he got the universe started, but then he's foreseen how it's going to run, and it's obviously running according to that course, but he's quote unquote letting it run. Although you can't really let it run, because if you've foreseen it, then in order for it to run, you would have to ensure that every particle operates in a certain way, or at least you'd foreseen how it's going to operate. And if anything changed, then of course you couldn't foresee it. So, but it's a trivial statement. I think is the bigger point.
The thing is, it's an obvious statement because sailors used the stars for navigation well before Muhammad came along and wrote this. So it's a pointless statement because as far as beacons are concerned, you're already saying something that had been used for several hundred years already, that the sailors used stars to navigate the oceans. Second of all, I thought the stars will serve as lamps to fire at the jinn that steal little stories that they hear from the Quran, then come back to earth. So which one is it? Are they beacons or are they missiles that Allah uses to fire at jinn? Which one is
And the
it?
shining decorations.
Well, there's so many of them. Presumably, you can use a few of them to throw as missiles, and the rest can stay. But if they were beacons, that's only, like you say, for a unique few human beings that have understood and studied that. Because if you ask most human beings on the planet, and you had a moonless night, then and asked them to navigate somewhere, most of us would be stuck, right? Most of us are not experts, I would venture to guess, at navigating by the stars. So he's given you a way that makes it incredibly difficult that only a few people have learned to do. How's that a good thing? Anyway, there we go. Stops. Back to you. Are we hearing anybody? Hello?
I'm here. I think
Oh,
you
okay.
must have
Stops has either stepped away
gone
or
somewhere.
his mic is
Shall I read
something's
now?
happened to his mic.
I can hear some kind of movements on his mic as if to suggest he's got up and walk somewhere. Do you want me to read 98 in the meantime?
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, he can always come back and we'll tell him we've read it, so go for it.
It is he who has produced you from a single person. Here is a place of sojourn and a place of departure. We detail our science for people who understand.
And Stops' version of that is
Okay.
God sends down rain. Is that right? Yeah. Stops' version of that is God sends. No? You were created from one human and explained, made clear the signs. So that's 98.
Sorry,
He has
my
produced
headset
you from.
just conked in.
What's that? Oh,
I had to
Stops
change
says his
headsets.
headset conked in. What, ran out of battery power or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just saying 98 there, so we just did.
Yeah, but the
98.
thing is, what I still wanted to do in 96, the most important thing here is that we're getting into this thing that everything has a purpose. And this is something that Muslims still believe and propagate. And this is so ingrained, I can't understand why or how. Everything needs a purpose. So sun and moon must have a purpose. Tell the time. Stars must have a purpose. Navigation. And this is something that you see all over the Quran, that everything has a purpose. And if you don't have a purpose, there's something wrong with you. And that
Well, I
is-
always ask them, right, what's the purpose of a rock? And at that point, there's like an uncomfortable silence or some gibberish that's responded
yeah,
to me.
exactly.
With, right?
So this shows the shortfall immediately.
We're on 99.
Well, I know
Stops.
there was. Okay, I was going to say
Sorry,
I know
go
two
on.
special. I was going to say, you say, what's the purpose of a rock? A Muslim should be able to answer that clearly. One is for people to bow down and kiss at Mecca, and the other one, that was the special rock, probably the most special rock in the history of religion, where it grabbed hold of Moses' clothes and ran away.
Yeah. That's a funny one. Okay. So God sends down rain. Oh no, important. You were created from one human. Now, this is one of the 13 materials that humans are created from, because this is a statement: you were created from one human. And everything was explained, everything was made clear. Well, it's not, because if you were created from one human, what the hell does that mean? You know, do you take a piece? Is this the story with the rib? Or
Presumably that's a poor way of explaining that you came from Adam, maybe, if you believe that story.
Yeah,
you could explain it
pretty
way
much.
better, right? You're a descendant of Adam. Adam was the first person. You are a descendant of Adam. Everybody would understand that.
Yeah.
Produced from a single person. You know, if you didn't know Adam, or if you were, from a different tribe or a different nation, you'd go, well, what single person? What are you talking about? But if
Exactly.
you explained that Adam, was in the view the first human, and that you are a direct descendant of Adam now, and you explained that in the language that people understood, then that'd be much clearer.
Well, it's not. This is. I'm falling over my tongue, and this is why it's not being explained at all, because it says one human. Okay, but one human. What does that mean? You have one man who is being created. Then from that man, he's creating a woman, but she is a clone. So she is identical to him, except for the Y chromosome being replaced with an X. That's it. Then they have sex and they have two sons. Now, the other people have to come about with the sons or the husband or somebody having sex with the mother. And then, until there's a girl who is the sister of the two sons, so then the sons have to have sex with the sister and the father also. So, this incest thing starts off very, very early. And this is very uncomfortable for Muslims. There's only one single article that I have seen so far which actually addresses this and says, yes, incest was allowed at the time. It was instrumental for God to bring about everybody to make sure that the genetic material of the human was being propagated properly. And I mean, for me, this is a weak excuse. But yeah, there's only one article so far that I know of that actually admits, yes, incest was the common thing at the time. The same
And
thing with Noah again.
well, what's the detailed signs for people who understand? What detailed signs are those?
Yeah. Oh, shit.
Clearly,
You
it's
know.
not in the Quran, so maybe it's referring to something else.
Why can't we have a Muslim to explain us? You know, I
I
don't
don't think they'd
understand
have a
why
good
the Quran
explanation.
always says it's explained, it's made clear, everything, but then you're just sitting there and you're thinking, okay, what am I looking at?
Yeah, then they have to go to a scholar who's made up something to, for his or her interpretation.
Yeah, which then is being refuted by or contradicted by another scholar.
Yep.
And then a third one comes along, and all of a sudden you have 4 different explanations. So great. God sends down rain. Oh, really? Is it? How much? Where?
Yeah,
Why? So why do we have so many droughts? Is he not doing his job properly? What's wrong with this guy?
and this is a direct plagiarism of the book of Isaiah, chapter 55,
Yeah,
verse 10.
of
He's
course.
just playing with that.
Yeah. But the thing is,
He's
if
just
you look at the
copying
God
that.
sends down rain, well, it's very, very seldom that you get the right amount. It's either too much or too little. You have landslides or you have drought. It's very, very rare. I mean, now there's another, what is it? A Faye. This is an F hurricane coming in the States, bringing too much rain. And there are other places which are dying from drought. So he's not doing a good job, is he?
And obviously Mecca is one of those places, right? It's in the desert. Even though
Yeah.
they've got a city around it, it was a desert before.
So why doesn't he send some rain into Mecca? Because Zamzam is drying up and they don't know what to do there. Do you know that they're pumping millions of liters or cubic meters or whatever of water up from the Red Sea because they don't have enough water in Mecca?
Yeah, and you can imagine there's far better places to live on earth than Mecca, right?
That's
So
why
maybe
the
that's a
Kafir,
test again, and Allah knows best.
and the Kuffar are not allowed in there.
Not that any of us really want to go there, and if
I
Thunderous
would
has
love
been,
to
he
go
could
there.
probably tell us all about it. Would you?
Do you
No,
see that there's... Sorry?
I've not been.
Oh, okay.
You've not been...
Good for you. Probably.
I would have loved to go there. I mean,
Really?
I would love to have, because do you see all these these signs popping up now from
Yes.
people writing notes, atheist in Mecca or atheist republic from Army Nawabi and things like that. So it's quite funny.
Yeah, they're taking sneaky photos, right? Inside.
And there's more and
main
more of
area.
them now. So it's quite funny. Okay, we come to chapter 6, 100. Jinn are called partners, and they invent children for God. Okay, I don't know what the fuck this is, really. I mean,
So they're obviously
I was
speaking
gonna
to
say,
they, meaning Christians, Jews, I guess. Yeah.
well, 100, I didn't quite understand this, where it says, they make jinns equal with Allah. And I can't recall a situation where in any religious text previous or the pagans that may have been around Muhammad at the time, where they tried to make jinns equal to Allah, because that sounds like a deliberate thing to do. You're deliberately making jinns equal to Allah. And I can't find anything where that has come from or what the source is. So if somebody wants to, if any Muslims out there that want to come on the show and help us understand what is the reference here about making jinns equal to Allah.
So according to Al Jalalain here, it's since they obey them by worshipping graven images. So presumably people who are non-Muslims are worshipping images, which they claim then or infer from that making equal to God. So what do they mean by making equal? Presumably they only mean worship. Instead of saying, hey, all people do is worship, quote unquote, graven images, the same as they worship God. But if they say they make them, if you didn't have this statement and you just looked at it, make equals, then that's a broad statement. Does that mean that they're equal in power, equal in their benevolence, or what, right? So you have to go and look to find out what it says, because it's not clear. And that's his interpretation, presumably.
This is what I mean, to make something. If you're doing it in ignorance, then you're not making something equal to Allah, because you don't even know Allah exists. So you're putting an object of veneration above every other god, whether you know those other gods exist or not. But if you're making something equal to Allah, that's quite deliberate. You're deliberately doing that. Yeah, you don't do it. You can't do it out of ignorance. You're
And
doing it
presumably
deliberately.
and I guess this is also a snub at Christians, but because by that stage I'm guessing, and you know better, Thunderous, the Trinities are already around by the time, and so this is a snub at the Trinitarian Christians, claiming that Jesus is God, and this is a backhanded.
But that's in the next verse. That's in the next verse, really.
Okay.
101.
Okay, I don't understand what this is. Jinn are called partners. I don't know how that works. And they invent children for God. Why would anybody say, yeah, this God has children? And we know that the Judean God, the Jewish God, doesn't have Ezra as a child. That's bullshit. So this, I don't know what this is.
Well, children meaning creation, right?
No,
It's not
this is
physical
physical children.
Where do you get that,
Can I just interject there? It stops. Last year, you said you married an angel.
Yeah.
Did you remember that?
Yes.
Do you remember you said you married? Oh no, the last time I'll repeat it. The last time you saw an angel, you married her.
Yeah.
Rob, do you remember? Stop saying that.
I don't
I
actually,
remember.
but I'll take your word that it definitely happened.
Okay. So does that mean you married a spirit creature? No, it must be, because you said when you saw an angel, you married her. So that must mean you married a spirit creature.
That depends what you mean by angel. Yeah.
Right? I know some men that refer to their daughters as their princesses, but those men aren't kings. How can the daughter be a princess if the father isn't a king?
Figure of speech, right?
I refer to my BMW Z4 E36 Coupe 3.01 the Richter scale. I refer to it as my baby. Now, did I have sex with a car, get a car pregnant, and it gave birth to a car? So that must mean I'm the father of the car because I refer to it as my baby.
Okay, but there's a difference here between figure of speech and literal. And here they want this literal child for a god because they invent this for Yahweh, that he's got Ezra as a son, which is not the case. And this is exactly what I think this is exactly what Rob is hinting at, and that is this snub at the Christians because they have a real man as a child, as a real son,
There's-
physical son of a god.
This is my point. The point I'm trying to get at is a term of endearment that the Islamic world, still to this day, 1400 years later, cannot grasp.
Yes.
They cannot grasp language.
Yeah, in this video that I'm doing at the moment, he's a complete fool. This Subor guy, he says, if you were to go back 2,000 years and freeze everybody up and take their DNA, you would see that if you take the DNA of Jesus, that the most probable mother is Mary, and then who is the father? Well, you don't know. So you take anybody who is the closest match because it's going to be none of those. So he is literally trying to put a non-human DNA as a human DNA into somebody to make it look like a human, which doesn't really make sense. You can't. But this is what he's trying. This is the literal explanation, or trying to explain something anyway. So, yeah. How can you have a son without a wife? Isn't that wonderful? The all-powerful, all-knowing, all able to do everything God can't have a son because he doesn't have a wife.
How could he have a son when he does not have a companion and he created all things? Well, because he's all powerful, right?
Yeah, but
Seems
he
trivially-
can't have a son.
I mean, he can create miracles. If you believe that God can do miracles, even if you're a Muslim, then God having a son, i.e. somebody that is directly created by him, but not through another human process, that seems trivially easy for him to do. That's not a problem. I mean, they ask the question as if it's unbelievably, they ask the question as if it's irrational or there is a contradiction there. And if a Muslim was, if I understand this correctly, if a Muslim was asking, well, how could this happen? I'm going to ask them, where's the contradiction in God creating a son? It depends how you define son. But if there is a son, i.e. a creation from God directly rather than through two humans, where's the contradiction there? And if they can't produce a contradiction, then it's not irrational, it seems to me.
Well, and not only that, they claim that their Allah can do anything, and there's nothing that he cannot do, but he can't have a son. So that already says, well, he can't do everything. Then he can do most things, but he can't have a son. So that goes from he can do anything to do that to say he could do most things.
Yeah, just ask them, what's the contradiction? Why can't he? And then they'll sort of give you some gibberish or some ad hoc explanation. But if you're saying he can't, i.e. that it's impossible, now you need to show the contradiction. Where is the contradiction?
Yeah, but look how stupid the Christians are, that they claim that this is the son. If it's not the son, because he needs a human being to do that, and blah, blah, blah. This is typical, nah. This is stupid.
Well, I think it's just a snub on the Christians. That's what it is here, right? I'm better. The Christians have got this all wrong, and that's why you need this book if you go back a couple of verses, right?
Yeah, but by reducing down the other previous scriptures, recognition of a certain man in a certain role, it reduces him down. But what does it do to Muhammad?
Well, they would claim that. Yeah, exactly. It'll elevate him because he's come to correct the mistakes, right? That's why he's necessary. That's why the book is necessary, because if he had all the information, he would be superfluous. So he's come to correct it. And if Jesus was the Son of God, then there would be, by definition, no need for a messenger. So you have to get rid of the Son of God in order for Allah, for Muhammad to be relevant.
Absolutely bang on.
Worship him. He is a guardian. And here I put the word that they are using, Vakilun, because a couple of sentences later I came across the same word, and I thought, and I checked, and it's different words. So here he's a guardian using Vakilun, and nobody can see him, but he sees everything, of course. And then you were enlightened. And if you accept...
Just going back to number 103, sorry, Stops, I didn't mean to interrupt. It says there, no vision can grasp him, but his grasp is over at 103. Are we on 103?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm behind.
Yeah, okay. Well, Muhammad went to heaven. He's supposed to have seen Allah.
No.
So
No. He just talked to him from behind a veil.
Did the angels see Allah?
This I don't know.
But
they're not humans. An angel is made from light. So, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, it says that no vision can grasp him. It's not reducing it down to humans. He's saying no vision. If angels have vision, if jinn have vision, and humans have vision, in that kind of sequential sense. So that must mean if they're all created by Allah and they have vision and consciousness, they must, if humans can't see him, then no one can see him. So Allah must be living in, when he created things, he must have veiled himself off away from his creation, so they can't see him then.
Correct.
And so that means angels can't see God, angels can't see God, and jinns can't see God. Because it says
because it says that whether angels have vision. Because if an angel is made from light, an angel made from light cannot have vision, but then it cannot embrace Muhammad and squeeze him either. So the whole
but then Allah told them to bow down to him. So which direction were they bowing? And how would they know to bow down to him? You can't see him.
Yeah. There are so many.
And how would they know if they can't see when the angel comes down to take the soul of a person? How do they know which person they're going to? Which direction do they take? How do they know where Earth is? How do they know that they're on Earth? I haven't misdirected themselves, got the wrong Google map and ended on Mars.
Well, you see, this is why they put the Mecca Kaaba there with the stone, so that you know exactly what to do.
Yeah, but we're talking about angel vision.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd push this one as much, because they could just say, angels operate in a way that is unknown to humans, but they are miraculous in some way, right? We can't explain it as humans. So when they say vision, that's just a metaphor for some other way that angels can perceive things around them, and it isn't necessarily scientific because whatever, right? They could just get out of it in that way. I mean, it's not a good answer, but it'd be sufficient for them not to worry about it. They'd shrug it off, it seems to me, very easily. So I wouldn't push, hey, well, how do angels have vision. If they're made of light, then, in order to have vision, you need light, hitting a receptor, a light receptor. They would just say it's angels are miraculous and bypass
Yeah,
that.
exactly. It's the old miracle cop out. Yeah.
But these defaults don't work with Alan knows best, because it turns around and says that he's above all comprehension. So that means that the angels are in the presence of Allah. So they can't see him and they can't comprehend him, or they can see him but they can't comprehend him.
But I think this is geared towards human beings, not angels or anything, because the nobody, I can see somebody saying, well, this is clearly directed at humans.
But for me, the book that's easy and easy to understand, the book made simple, doesn't seem to be making it easy to understand. We're discussing this point here just on this subject alone.
Yeah, but Thunder, you're so picky.
Okay, I'm just being literalist again.
Yeah, I think this one here, this
I
is
know.
sort of Yusuf Ali's interpretation of above
Yeah,
comprehension.
exactly.
I mean, I'd like to use that, but I think we've got to be a bit careful. When I looked at the roots here, it doesn't the visions,
give that,
but
no.
he can grasp the vision, and he, the all subtle, the all aware. So,
And Thunderous is right. You should be able to take it literally, and it should make sense. And it doesn't.
yeah. Otherwise, you need some mechanism to explain very clearly when to take it literally and when to take it metaphorically.
Yeah.
And if you're leaving it up to humans who are fallible, well, then you're just inviting errors.
Well, this is what Boma used to say. Some verses are this and some others. And I asked him, well, which are what? He says, well, that's for God to know. I said, well, big deal. Okay, so worship him, he's a guardian in 102. And then 104, it's you were enlightened. If you accept, you will be rewarded. My God, my tongue. You were enlightened, and if you accept, you'll be rewarded. And if you don't, you'll be punished. We've heard this before. I am not a guardian. So there's a direct contradiction here. He is a guardian in 102, and he is not a guardian in 104. The problem is I don't understand why the translators would use guardian, but the words are different. And this is quite strange for me, that they would say he is a guardian, he is not a guardian, creating a direct contradiction when the Islamic text doesn't do that. I don't know where the problem is. If you can use a different interpretation for guardian for wakilun and a different one for bi hafisin. This I don't know.
Can I just bring out a point made by Why So Religious in the side chat? It says, with reference to seeing Allah, chapter with regard to seeing Allah, what was proven in Sahih. Sorry, the sidebars just skipped. The chat missed out. Sahih, but Ibn Abbas, it said that Muhammad saw his Lord with his heart twice, and Aisha denied that he had seen him. There's a link there provided by Myso. Ibn Abbas refers to seeing without specifically specifying how, and others indicated that it was with his heart. Sometimes he says that Muhammad saw his Lord, and sometimes he says that Muhammad saw him. So they can't decide whether he saw him with his heart or with his eyes. What I don't understand is how can you see with your heart? I can understand
exactly.
that with your mind's eye. I can understand the mind's eye and the power of perception to perceive seeing something. That I give, but not with the heart.
But even if it was with his mind's eye, if Allah is invisible to the eye, I think that was one of the verses here, or something similar to that. No vision can grasp him. He's above all comprehension. Or if we take the sort of seemingly more accurate, and vision perceives him not. Then, if you can't see him, even how would you perceive? What is it that you could perceive? If you can't see something, what is it you're going to perceive? Because you would never know what it is that you're perceiving is in fact a representation. If I said to you, I want you to conceive of a Zingli song, what are you going to do? It's beyond your comprehension, right? If I don't explain, it's beyond your comprehension.
Kurt Hanneman, I did mention that a moment ago. Did Muhammad not fly up to meet, then negotiate with Allah 500 times? So it was 50 times down to 5 for the prayer when he went on the Miraj up to heaven. And it is suggested by some that Allah hid himself from Muhammad behind a veil. I personally think he saw Muhammad, Allah. I think from the way I read the Quran, Muhammad is so special. He was probably allowed the ability to see Allah. I don't see anything.
problem then, Thunderous, is Muslims would have to deny that because otherwise it would contradict 104, 6104, which says that, not
No,
104, sorry, 103, no
Yeah.
vision can grasp him.
Yeah.
If they mean no vision, or vision perceives him not, then that would include presumably Muhammad, unless
Yeah,
it's
but
specified
Muhammad has
otherwise.
special treatment in everything.
Yeah, but
That's
then
the
it would
point.
then it would specify that. We would expect that, right?
We would, but you don't necessarily have to. You can simply assume it. Well, Muhammad is different from in every which way, so he was different in this way as well. It's just so obvious that it wasn't mentioned.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a leap. You'd have to
It is.
establish that criteria somehow within the Quran rather than just infer it.
Well, him riding on a flying donkey is a bit of a leap, isn't it?
Yeah, but any human could have done that as well. It's not as if that's unique to Muhammad.
No,
Somebody
the
else
air
could hop on the
resistance
back
would
of
have
a.
blown him off. Come on, he didn't have a canopy or anything. This is so funny. Okay, 105 again. The same thing. We explain the signs to make it clear. No, you don't. No, you don't. It doesn't matter how many times
One
you
of my
say this. It
favorites.
does not make it true.
And thus do we explain the signs by various
Yes.
symbols that they may say, Thou hast taught us diligently, and that we may make the matter clear to those who know, or Sahih International. And thus do we diversify the verses so the disbelievers will say, You have studied, and so we may make the Quran clear for a people who know.
What explanation? What signs? What symbols? The only symbols I know are on a drum kit.
Yeah, but we already said. I mean, it just said the signs are day and night. Okay, and then it says because of the sun and the moon. But we saw that this is wrong. So the signs are wrong from a physical point of view, and it doesn't make it clear. So nobody has explained any kind of sign, and nobody has made it any clearer. So, but 106 says, "Follow me." It's like at the airport, the truck, "Follow me." If God had wanted you. If God had wanted, you would not have taken other gods. There you go. But he didn't want it. So you could take other gods, and you did take other gods, and this is why you're getting punished. Because God didn't know that there are other gods and that you would take other gods. If he had known that, he would have wanted you not to take other gods which don't exist. This doesn't make sense. Oh, goodness.
But it does say what you
why
say.
are you still Muslims? Please tell me this.
But it certainly does seem to infer quite clearly that had Allah willed, then you wouldn't have associated. So Allah willed this to be the case, in which case, according to this, the Christians and the Jews, for example, could not have done otherwise,
Exactly.
but to take partners or whatever the case is, right? Or take false gods or whatever it is. So it was impossible for them not to, because if he willed and they had free will and they could override it, then he couldn't have willed it.
I think Septimus has mentioned something nice in the side chat as well. He's mentioned there, I think non-Muslims read the Quran with the assumption that it should make sense.
Yeah.
Functionally, its purpose is to not make sense so that it can be properly used by the state for political objectives. That's a nice point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the idea. We're expecting it to make sense. We do come with a presupposition that makes sense, because that's the claim as well.
Okay.
And it makes the claim within the book itself, right, as well. So unless the book is contradicting itself.
But it can get worse. 108. Don't insult the other gods in case you accidentally insult God. And he will tell them. Oh, come on, people. This is an insult to my intelligence.
Do
really.
not insult those who invoke other than Allah, lest they insult Allah in enmity without knowledge. Thus we have made pleasing to every community their deeds. Then to their Lord is their return, and he will inform them about what they used to do.
He's saying don't revile other gods. Okay, fine, but Muhammad did revile the other gods. So okay, fine. It was maybe he knew who Allah was. That's why he was reviling the other gods. But it's not exactly a standard for a prophet to do, then, is it? And what was he to expect from those other people but to revile other gods if Muhammad was following this? If Muhammad was leading that pattern?
Yeah, but what
So-
are these other gods if other gods don't exist, if there is only one God?
Yeah, but the point is the argument would be that Satan has created all these other religions to mislead people away from the truth. That's why you have all these other religions, and they may think that they're worshiping God, but they're not worshiping God. In that sense, it's like some people may refer to the god of the belly. You know, the belly isn't a god, but it's the position it has, or the role that it has, or the function it has is in that person's life. So in that context, it could be referred to as a god.
So if your kneecaps are other gods, you're not allowed to insult your kneecaps in case you insult your tummy.
Well, I mean, they shouldn't insult other. Well, I mean, we see Muslims, for example, in Speaker's Corner, obviously not following this and insulting
Yeah.
the Christian God, the Christian God, or whatever the case is, all the time. But when they say we, the royal we, so presumably that's Allah, made alluring to each people its own doings. Thus we have made pleasing to every community their deeds. Then to their Lord is their return. Then they will return to their Lord, meaning Allah, presumably. So he's made it such that they will be pleased with their own versions of God, which is not Allah, but in the end they'll be returned to Allah. Okay?
Yeah.
So obviously those people then shouldn't be given Dawah, or what?
Well,
Because
they
if
need
they
the
are,
Dawah to bring them back. Yeah.
Yeah, but then they could take that as an insult on their God, and then they would, have spite or revile Allah in response, which is contrary to this verse.
Yeah, because they would be thinking that they are being taken away from the true God.
Yeah, correct.
Rob, as
But
soon as you put a
ultimately, I
little
guess-
bit of logical thinking into this, it falls apart.
Yeah, it's just. And in the end, they'll go back to, in the end, they'll find out the truth. Essentially, they'll go back to their Lord, i.e., presumably Allah, not the Lord that they claim to believe in. And then they'll tell them the truth and inform them of what they used to do. Well, by that stage, it's too late, unless you are not. You're only judging them on their deeds. And if you are judging them on their deeds, and they don't know what the correct deeds are, then that would be an unfair judgment. So they would need to know, and if it's the case that everybody's got the fitra, well, clearly not everybody does, or at least they don't act on it. And if somebody is genuinely trying to and not doing it, whose fault is that? It can't be theirs, because they've made it. It's been willed this way.
And this is it's been driven home in the next ones. They say they believe there's a miracle, but they don't. I don't know. Do I need a miracle? No, I don't.
And they swear by Allah, their strongest oaths, that if a sign came to them, they would surely believe in it. Say, the signs are only with Allah, and what will make you perceive that even if a sign came, they would not believe? Let's just see if we can see.
This is get out clause. This is his get out clause.
Yeah, unfalsifiable. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is an unfalsifiable thing.
And now,
they would surely believe.
And now it gets interesting. So we turn off their hearts and their vision and leave them to suffer. And this is the same theme that we had a little bit earlier, last week I think it is, where Allah intentionally says, well, I'm going to harden your heart so that you can't see it. Fuck you, Charlie. And this is the same thing we see here again.
Well, at the very least, that's being super uncharitable. So they swear their strongest oaths if there was a special sign, by it they would believe. Say, certainly all signs are in the power of Allah, but what would make you Muslims realize that even if special signs came, they would not believe? And then, as you say, we shall turn to confusion their hearts and eyes. Even if they refuse to believe this in the first instance, we shall leave them in their trespass to wander in distraction.
And then, even with angels and zombies talking, they will not believe. Unless, and we have the same thing again, unless God wills. But most are ignorant. Now, is it that most are ignorant, or is it that most are being kept in the dark by God?
No, it's clearly the scriptures that tell you that most people are kept in the dark, which kind of makes the whole point of the apologetics and polemics of many Muslims in the world today useless.
Yeah, but then, like you say, there's the get out of jail thing here again, which is unless it's Allah's plan, unless Allah should will. So whatever happens, either way, they can. I mean, this is unfalsifiable because if somebody does turn and become a Muslim after seeing quote unquote signs, well, they go, well, that's what Allah's will. If they don't, then it's because Allah's closed their heart. Unfalsifiable claim. You've got it on both ends. That's not a rational. view
It's the
to hold.
same as the sort of like English witch burn in Heinz. You know, if she drowned,
Yeah, exactly.
She was innocent. If she floated, she was a witch.
Yes, exactly.
And then we made an enemy for prophets. Fancy words. They wouldn't have done it. Okay, I have no idea what this means.
Likewise, we did make for every messenger an enemy, evil ones among them and jinns, inspiring each other for flowery discourses by way of deception. If thy Lord had so planned, they would not have done it. So leave them and their inventions alone. And thus we have made for every prophet an enemy, devils for mankind and jinn, inspiring one another a decorative speech in delusion. But if your Lord had willed, they would not have done it. So leave them and that which they invent. But if your Lord had willed, they would not have done it. So he willed for them to do this. Because if he'd willed the opposite, they wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, but there are prophets, and it says now that this God made enemies for the prophets, probably to test them. So you get devils from mankind and jinn, and then inspiring to one another decorations and illusions. In other words, they're trying to get the prophets to say something that is not correct. But
Got somebody in the chat there, I don't know if you know about that, stops making the claim that Surah 6 has been abrogated.
by Surah 9.5. And what does 9.5 say?
Let's just get rid of that quickly. But when the forbidden months are past, then
This is
fight
a
and
sword
slay the
thing.
pagans
Yeah, okay.
wherever you find them.
Why would
and
I not
seize
know
them.
this?
Say again?
Is that the one after the if you killed an innocent, you killed all mankind?
No.
But chapter 9:5, I mean.
This is the most famous sentence in the Quran. This is why I'm disgusted at the moment that I didn't immediately know this.
When you say famous, in what sense?
In every sense, this is the most quoted
Oh,
violent
right.
sentence in the whole Quran. And this is the most apologized for sentence in the Quran.
Yeah.
Okay, but we'll get to this one. Okay, but Marijana, then tell me something. If this has abrogated, I have two questions. Where does it say that 9.5 abrogates 6.1.12? And number two, why would anybody write a book which has been sitting there for billions and billions of years with sentence 6.1.12 intact when it has been abrogated at the same time that the Quran came out? Can anybody explain this to me?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, we made enemy for the prophets, fancy word, they wouldn't have done it. I don't know, this doesn't really make much sense. Even if you take the version that you say, it says, yeah, they created some enemies for the prophets, but if Allah willed, and this is the funny thing, if he had willed, they would not have done it. What do you mean they? Who is they? Who did something here? We have made the prophet. We is God, okay? We God
Yeah.
we made it. They would not have done it. What are you talking about? Is it inspiring to one another decorative speech that is being done, or what is it? And then, if this is this speech that was done, which would not have been done if Lord had willed, why would then leave them and that which they invent? So this is like a totally chaotic sentence which does not make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a Muslim would just say, "Hey, they had the free will," but then that would contradict a few verses back where Allah had willed everything.
Yeah, but I'm looking at the construction of the sentence. If your Lord had willed, but there's a but there. But if your Lord had willed. So, if okay, if this is the speech, then if this happened, then they would not have done it if this God had wanted it. But he did want it, so leave them and that which they invent. But you can't do that because the prophets cannot be deluded, because they are the ones delivering the one true message. So this doesn't make sense.
Well, I think it makes sense. Maybe it makes sense in the following way: that he's made these prophets, but he's made enemies like devils and jinns and so forth and evils, so that you humans can notice the difference, right? Because everybody's speaking the truth. You wouldn't discern one from the other. They'd all be messengers or prophets. So to clearly demarcate a prophet, potentially what you have is you have some window dressing. You have people who you are willing to speak nonsense, so
Okay.
that you, presumably humans could tell the difference.
Yeah. And now?
I mean, you wouldn't need that, right? All you'd need is for a prophet to make, incredible predictions, so accurate, so precise. We've been over that in a previous show.
Okay, so if I'm the human and I have been inspired by whatever, so that I am now on the wrong path. So leave them and that which they invent. So in other words, if I am the one who is being tricked, then I should be left alone and going down the wrong path into damnation, okay? But if your Lord had willed, they would not have done it. They would not have done it what? They would not have believed this, not gone into this delusion, not accepted this, or not given them this wrong speech.
Well, he willed for them to do that, right?
Yeah, but what? What is the it?
Where are you seeing the word "it"?
They would not have done it.
The "it" meaning the delusion, the flowery discourse, decorative. What's it? Decorative speech in delusion. That's the "it." It seems to me.
So the devils would not have done this if your Lord had willed this. So if God wouldn't have wanted them to misguide the people, they wouldn't have done this.
Correct.
Yeah, but then you leave them and that which they invent. Then the them goes towards the devils.
The devils or the evil ones among
Yes.
men and jinns, right? Mankind and
Exactly.
jinn.
Yeah, but then this is talking about the devils.
Yeah. So you leave them in the sense that you leave them to do their evils, and there'll be a day of reckoning for them.
Ah.
But also
That's
you couldn't have done anything anyway. You couldn't have done anything anyway.
No,
So
because the
saying
Lord
that
willed it, yeah.
is a trivial statement, because if it were the case that he said, "Hey, but try and bring them to the right path," when he's already willed them to do the opposite, that would be irrational. So it's
Fancy
instead of making an
word
irrational
to
statement, you're making a trivial statement. It's not much
Mislead
better.
them. And they wouldn't have done it. Okay, then this is correct now. Because we made an enemy for prophets. No, we made not an enemy, but we made enemies. We made for every prophet an enemy. Okay, this is one enemy. We made an enemy for prophets, okay? Fancy words to mislead them. All right? They wouldn't have done it if God had willed. No, that's correct. Oh boy, this
Let's
is...
ask the question: Why would Allah make enemies for prophets? What's the point there?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if the enemy is an enemy, then the enemy is not really an enemy. He's just a tool used by Allah. So is
Correct.
Allah really the enemy?
No, well, the enemy is a tool. You're right, but it's to differentiate a prophet from somebody who's not a prophet. So that would be
But in whose eyes, if you already know that the enemy is nothing more than the creation of Allah deliberately, and you're forewarned about that, then surely then that person is not an enemy. But just
Well, you
nothing more
wouldn't
than
you wouldn't know, right? So presumably it's there to like you say, to accentuate the prophet, because the prophet is the right speaking one, and you've read the book, or at least you've heard about it, and so when he comes to you, you could tell the difference. Otherwise, if everybody was speaking the truth, you wouldn't differentiate. They'd all be prophets, or they'd all be normal men who knew the truth. So for him to be elevated, you have to have something to elevate him against, in relation to.
And does the false prophet or the enemy get punished?
Presumably,
Then who
which would
punishes
be,
him and why? Because if Allah is the one that created the enemy, then why is Allah punishing his own creation?
well, exactly. That's a whole different kettle of fish, which the Muslims have a
Yeah,
great battle
and
to try and overcome.
Marjana,
Unsuccessfully
thank
in my
you.
ears.
I'm aware of this list where somebody claims that this was abrogated there and then. You have several people who have these tables showing this was abrogated here and blah blah blah. But you can't really see on what grounds. It doesn't say why, and it doesn't answer my second question at all. But I'm aware what you are saying. Absolutely, I'm aware of those lists, those tables. This is quite strange. I think what they've done actually is they've taken sentences which don't make sense, which don't fit in, which cannot be explained, and said, well, we'll just declare them as being abrogated because in the Quran it does say that there are sentences which are being abrogated. It's just that a lot of scholars are saying, no, this is not true. So there's a whole discord here between the different scholars, the ones saying yes, the others are saying no. The other ones are saying this one was abrogated, the other ones are saying no, it was a different one. So this is a huge mess. So, yeah. But thank you for that. That's very nice of you that we can go and take a look at it and take it as one of the examples, because I've seen I don't know how many of these tables which show what was abrogated, when and who and where. But yeah, this is like playing roulette. All right, guys, are we ready for the theme of the month?
Absolutely.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, what I've done is I have. Hang on, I need to go here, here, and then here. Okay. No, what do I do? This is what I do. No. Oh shit, this is you. I need to go on here. This is what I need to do. There is a page on the net by somebody called Ibn al-Ajuran. And this guy has all these here as Dawah channels. Now what I did is I took Merciful Servant with 3.3 million subscribers as the first one. And then I took Smile to Jannah for 300,000 and so on. And then you have Dawah I ignored because we know that's stupid. But what is interesting is the Sunni Defense. It's only got 18,000 subscribers. But the polemic here is absolutely amazing. How much they hate Shias. Everything in here is really intense. The way that they are attacking Shias, I have never seen so much hatred between identical groups. I don't know whether Protestants and Catholics had this also like 100 years ago, but this is so intense. I was so surprised. Then of course we have Adnan with just 37. Okay, I ignored this. And then this Radush, where is he? This one. Okay, there's just a couple of things. Then, after I finished with this one, I said, well, there must be something else. So I started looking again for Dawah and stuff like this. And then I came across it's a company in Australia called One Path, which is a professional video studio. And they have like Living Muslim, Talk Islam, Muslim Lady. They have all these people in there. They're also very active on Facebook. And they have a huge following here. So this is why I've selected a video from One Path to share with you, because this is incredibly interesting what they are doing. I mean, there's nothing really new. I mean, it's not that they are suddenly coming up with things that are new for us or something. No, that's definitely not the case. But it's a different approach, and it's high quality, high impact. This is definitely going to make its mark in a couple of weeks. Mark my words. So I'm not a prophet or something, but I think this is gonna hit it. So, all right. So let me do a Chrome tab and show you quickly. Now I need to find this stupid thing. Oh, come on. There we go. Okay, so this time I've clicked on the audio, so you should be able to hear the
You
audio.
got Joe Rogan up. Yep.
And this is a short video, it's just 5 minutes. If anybody, are you somebody watching the chat? Because
Yeah, we're looking.
if I'm operating
Can you
this
hear
and
us?
I can't.
Can you hear us, Stops?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Then if you watch the chat, if somebody in the chat, if you hear the video and you want us to stop, just do one enter, one enter, one enter or something, so we can, this will catch our attention. So you don't have to type gin and tonic show, that's too long. Just type one enter, one enter, one enter, catches our attention, then we'll just go and stop it, okay?
And one of the things that confuses me the most is that we don't really understand what gravity is.
Did everybody understand that?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could hear that.
In the chat, any reaction? Everybody clear with this? Where he says we don't really know what gravity is. Okay. Now Neil deGrasse Tyson, Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson comes and explains it.
In science, if we can describe how something works and predict its future behavior, we claim to understand it and we move on. Science can describe how gravity works, but can they describe why it works?
Can we?
I can describe what gravity is doing. I even have a mechanism for it. Are you going to still ask me why is there gravity? Is that answer not fulfilling enough to you, even in the why department?
Wait, what? I don't know about you, but I don't think this makes any sense. Let me explain why. Science has helped us progress in many aspects of our lives, whether that's in advancing medicine, developing technology, or helping us understand the world in which we live. Science utilizes our senses to observe and investigate the physical world to determine how mechanisms function in our universe. We live in a world where materialism has become the norm, and it has become increasingly accepted that the truth can only be derived through our senses. Unfortunately, this has led many people to adopt incoherent worldviews and false assumptions about science.
Has anybody spotted this, that they are going into the standard apologetics here, that we use our senses and we are limited by our senses? No, we are not. This is the funny thing, that I hear this again and again and again, that science is limited because it limits our senses, it's limited by our senses. And they don't understand that we are using probes, we're using technology to overcome the shortage of our senses. And this is exactly the point that these people will never acknowledge. They don't understand science enough to understand that we are not limited by our senses. But this is going to be the foundation for everything else that follows.
And what truths it can and can't reveal. Worldviews such as philosophical naturalism.
Okay. Rob, you've actually opened my eyes on this, that as soon as they start mentioning philosophical naturalism, you need to cry loudly and say foul. Because hardly anybody goes according to philosophical naturalism, because there's this other thing which is called methodological. What's it called?
Methodological naturalism, yeah.
Methodological naturalism. And this is the one that is the applied one, right?
Yeah, that's the one that science uses. So
Exactly. So
it doesn't rule out a God. It cannot investigate God directly. if God is not part of the natural world. However, if God intervenes or interacts in the natural world, that process, if it violates the natural laws, then we can investigate. That's and Sean
Exactly.
Carroll has said the same. There's no reason to, if in fact, people rose from the dead, etc., or whatever the claim may be, there's nothing that prevents science from investigating those claims. If it could be the case that we could see human regeneration in action, we would say that would be very likely a miracle taking place, because we have there's no way that we know through natural processes that you can overcome entropy. In which case that would be, so if that were the case, then something would be happening that was not that it's not scientific, but unnatural or non-natural, or whatever term you might use, or supernatural, if that were the case.
Supernatural or metaphysical.
Urge that reality is exhausted by nature, containing nothing supernatural, and that the scientific method should be used to investigate all areas of reality, including the human
You see, no, this is not the case. There is no law, there is no rule, there is nothing that says you have to use this and you must do it like this. This is a consensus that a lot of collaboration between people has enabled us to come up with a methodology that has turned out to be the best way of working together across nations, across countries, across languages, across everything. And it enables the collaboration of people. And this is what we're using. So there is no law that says you must do that. If somebody can, come up with a different solution which works better, everybody will quite happily go and change. And this is the point that these people will not acknowledge. They will always harp on about their philosophy, but they don't go and look at the actual work that is being done. And this is the problem with all these apologist tactics, that they will always try and keep you on the philosophical, track. They will never allow you to go into applied science where it makes sense. They will make claims regarding the philosophy. And this is the problem with these kind of approaches.
spirit.
I think the main reason that Muslim apologists do this is because obviously science and the Quran are antithetical. And so, tortoise and others that have realized this cannot appeal to science. And in fact, what they want to do is sidestep science, or put science aside and go, well, hey, it's limited in its applicability, in the sense that we could be wrong. We're not infallible. And so, and his view is, of course, don't use science and the Quran now. But the reason he says that is because science could be mistaken, and quote unquote, it's always changing. So don't use that, with the inference that the Quran is unchanging and is always correct, where's the argument for that, please? Apart from your
stable.
presupposition that it's the case, you don't have an argument that that's necessarily the case. And so this whole thing is around trying to show that, well, hey, science has its limits, and we can, in order to investigate this from this red herring position of philosophical naturalism, we can appeal to philosophy, because it's not open and shut cases. And there's always debate around the philosophical issues. So Muslim apologists feel like they have a refuge there rather than in the science, or at least the more sophisticated ones think that that's the case. The ones that haven't caught up yet still think there's science in the Quran.
Some atheists are convinced that science is the only means or method by which truth can be attained.
I don't know any
makes me so
atheist that
mad.
says that.
This makes me so mad. I mean, who claims that? Number one, an atheist is only an atheist. In other words, somebody who says, I don't believe in gods. I don't believe gods exist. That's it. So I as a person, as a scientific person, I will make some claims regarding science, but never that science is the only way to get to truth. That's crazy. Nobody who is scientifically literate will make that claim, let alone an atheist, because an atheist has no wood in this.
But there's a subtle thing in there as well, Stops, because I would imagine that most atheists, and I'm not sure. Maybe some theists, I'm not sure. But most atheists would say that it's the most reliable method in your journey towards truth. Reliable in the sense that you could share it with other people. Look, if I have a special experience, only I've had that experience, nobody's around me, that's very difficult for me to convince other people of. But if it's something that can be repeated and shown through the scientific method, well, then other people are likely to be convinced. So there's a difference between saying it's the only method and it's the most reliable method. I think, if I'm correct, I'm not sure if I am, you can tell me, most atheists would say that it's the most reliable method, but not the only method.
Yeah, but to what? There's no ultimate truth. You cannot say it's the only way to truth. No, it is only it's the only reliable way to get a handle on natural phenomena. It's not the general method for anything that is true. 1 and 1 is 2. You cannot use science to verify that. So it is not the universal truth that they always make it out to be. No, it is not. We are only talking about natural phenomena, and that is it. As soon as a God becomes detectable, he is part of natural phenomena, then we can go and investigate it. But until that happens, we can't. So stop telling us that it is the only way to truth, the absolute truth, capital T truth. It is not. It is like the same way, it's a tool, the same way as a hammer is a tool. You can use a hammer, which is wonderful if you want to hit a nail into something, but is not so useful if you want to clean your windows. So you don't use, the hammer is limited because you will not use a hammer to clean your windows. The same thing it applies for science. So you can only use a tool for that which it is intended for. And that's not for ultimate truth.
And that all questions about the world we live in can be answered through science.
That again is true. Because the world that we live in, here we're talking about nature. So the only way that we are aware of, that we know, that leads us to reliable and robust answers and explanations about the world that we live in is science. Am I wrong in any way? Am I making sense? Is this in any way correct?
Yeah, I think it's the most reliable way to move towards what is probably true. As you say, T with a capital truth with a capital T is there's a lot of philosophical literature on this, most of which I've never read. But the people that are experts in this, it's a difficult philosophical question because the ontological, i.e. the state of being, the way the world is, we may never know for sure, quote unquote, what that is, but it raises or lowers the probability of it being true or likely to be true. I think likely to be true is a better way of putting it if you're going to be philosophically accurate.
Agreed. Yeah.
Another false assumption is when something is a scientific fact, then that means it will never change.
Who says that? Who says that a scientific fact can't change?
Well,
I think there's a confusion here in the video between
Yes.
a scientific hypothesis or a scientific theory and a fact, and
And
they
the
are
law,
conflating
exactly.
science and philosophy together here. Because if there's a philosophical fact, then it would be the case that whatever the fact is in fact the case. So if there is something reality, whatever reality is, there are facts to be known about that. I would grant that to be the case. But scientific fact is almost like an oxymoron in a sense. There's scientific hypothesis that a layperson would say is a fact, but if you were to talk philosophically, you say, hey, the probability of this scientific hypothesis is likely to be true within a given range, whatever that might be. But facts suggest that it is the case and could never change. Well, that would only be the case if you were infallible and, in fact, you had epistemic certainty about whatever the ontological claim is. Let's say the earth goes around the sun. If it were the case that you could be certain, then you could say it's a scientific fact. If you can pull up a scientist who will say that, I'd be interested to find one.
Well, if you say hydrogen exists, okay, it's a scientific fact. This will never change. Absolutely. But it's
Yeah,
not
I'll be
useful.
careful of saying that because then all you have to, anybody who's going down it depends whether you're talking philosophically or layperson or in what sense. I think one of the things here is to go, You know, if it's a philosophical claim, then all somebody has to do is, well, how do you know that the idea of a hydrogen atom isn't something that's just been invented yesterday
Right.
and you're a brain in a vat? You can't get out of that philosophically. So
That's why I hate
saying
it.
that it's just been invented, right? So that thing that you think is a hydrogen atom is just something in your imagination. You can't get out of that. You can point to it, but that pointing, somebody will just ask you, well, how do you know what you're pointing to in fact exists? And at that
this
point,
is this whole
all you can appeal.
basis of presuppositionism. This is all they do.
Yeah, so I think the big thing
Obvious-
here is just to go on. It's just to separate. Are they talking philosophically or layperson?
Exactly.
And people that understand the difference, if they have an agenda, they'll conflate them. If they don't have an agenda and they're not philosophically literate, then they'll just make statements like, "It is a fact." What do you mean by fact? Is it likely to be true, or is it the case that it is the case and could not be false? Now, somebody who makes that claim has got a burden to justify that claim.
So we need to point this out, that this is a common strategy, okay? This is exactly something to watch out for.
Firstly, all these points mentioned are problematic. Firstly, the assumption that science is the only means to attain the truth is incorrect. Although science has
That's a
helped us
red herring
answer some
anyway.
questions, however, it does have some limitations. Science is restricted to our limited observation and our
Well, our limited observation, that is what science was invented for. That is why we have science, and this is why we have spent the last 250 years tinkering with this and coming to the conclusion that we have today. And this is what it is there for. This is, the same as the hammer, which is there to hammer a nail into something. Science is there to investigate the world around us. And that's all it does. It does nothing else.
perception
The
of
other
the world.
But hang on, stops. The other thing there's a conflation here that we need to separate. One is the principle, and the other is the practice or the pragmatic
The application,
argument.
yeah.
Currently, we are limited, but science, in principle, can investigate everything in the universe.
okay.
That is natural, or
That's a
that, in
good
fact,
point,
even
yeah.
that happens in the universe. You wouldn't even have to say natural, but anything that happens in the universe, in principle. Let's say somebody resurrected. In principle, you could bring the scientific method to bear on that. If there was a weighted, if you could observe that or go back in the time, or if somebody did it today, for example, if there was a second coming or whatever it is, and there was something that happened that we could scientifically investigate, we could do that. So there's a difference between pragmatic. We have a limited abilities currently, but then the other question is what is it in principle that science is limited to within the universe? I'm not sure what the limit is there. If there is a limit, somebody have to make an argument for what that limit is and why it is impossible that science could overcome whatever that limit is.
Well, they
in
can't
principle.
explain the origin of life, the origin of the universe, and the origin of consciousness, which is not there for. This is,
Yeah, but that's only currently, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing in principle that says that we can't come to an understanding of those things. Nothing in principle says that. Or if you're going to make a claim that it is, then I want to know what the argument is that is necessarily impossible.
that's why I ask people, well, why don't you, instead of saying, well, let's go back 1400 years and stay stagnant, why don't you roll up your sleeves and find out? And then expand science. If it is so limited, why don't you make it less limited? Why don't you help with that? Instead of just putting your arms into your lap and hoping that a God is there.
I think the biggest thing here stops with this video and any of the Muslim apologists is to ask them, what do you mean by X? What do you mean by fact? What do you mean by science? Ask them the questions, get them to say it, and then go, okay, is that the methodology you want to employ in this discussion? Because either you agree with it and you go with that route, or you disagree with it and you provide a counterexample. So I think it's very important to ask the question, what do that person who's making the claim mean by X?
Now, the question to Radik Lozu, is the scientific method intended to prove or disprove the existence of God? This is like asking, well, you can't take your car and drive to Mars, because the car is not intended to drive to Mars. The scientific method is not intended to prove or disprove the existence of God. It doesn't care. Scientific method, science, does not care about beliefs or gods.
But I think it stops on that point. It depends what he means by prove. Okay, if it's the case that what he means by prove is that it is necessarily the case and couldn't be otherwise, then we're fallible human beings, and that is very unlikely to be the case. But if it is on balance of probability and the probability is high, then if there's claims made in the Quran that are claims about science and science demonstrably shows the opposite, then if you accept that as proof, then yes, you could disprove a God. If God said whatever it is, that I did this or that happened, and we could show that that it's highly unlikely to the point of being virtually absurd, like the moon being split and then coming together again. Unless you're going to claim that everything that happened is a miracle and is impossible to investigate, such that like the moon has been split and come back together again, that there's no evidence that it was ever split, well, then you've got an unfalsifiable claim. But if there's a claim that the moon was split and we know of no way for that to happen, and there should be evidence of it of having split, and you agree with that, well, then science can be brought to bear. And if the claim is that God did that, and we can show that it's very likely that did not happen, and you accept that proof isn't absolute but probabilistic, then you could falsify God in that sense. So it depends what the person means.
Yeah. And Alhamdulillah, in the past hour, a resolution has been passed in Turkey to turn the Hagia Sophia back into a mosque. You are like 3 weeks behind. We've been talking about this for weeks. Today, I even read out the news that the first Imam call has been issued through huge loudspeakers. You are way behind. You need to wake up.
Around us through our senses. This is a significant factor because what we know as non-observable today can be observable tomorrow.
Yeah.
A relevant example could be the invention of the light microscope. Subsequently after that, the electron microscope. These technological progressions have revealed to us things which were previously considered unobservable or non-observable. Another reason why science cannot be used to establish the truth about our reality is the fact that science has no foundation.
Okay, I don't know how you can conflate reality with morality. Why science is limited in reality? Because it has no foundation for morality. Now, number one, those are two different fields, and number two, it does. I don't know where these guys get this from. I mean, they're like millions of light years behind. This is, of course, science has a foundation for morality. Of course, we can show the difference between well-being or not. Of course, we can look at pain receptors. Of course, we can look at these things. This is an old myth that has been, I don't know, debunked hundreds of years ago. Why do you carry on with this science and morality thing? I don't understand this.
Yeah, I don't know
Any
what that
other
means. Science has no foundation. Science is a methodology. It isn't a moral system.
Exactly.
Science does what science does in an effort to uncover our best understanding about the world. It doesn't prescribe what we ought to do. It prescribes or shows or appears to demonstrate what is, not what you ought to do.
And it's not an ideology. They're stupid, really. This is really, really stupid. This is willful ignorance. I have no other word for
For
this.
morality. Science cannot tell us what is right and what is wrong.
Yes, it can.
Some atheists have taken the position that morality stems from our biological
Atheists don't do anything. It's an atheist, and that is all. It's just about not believing gods exist. Gods and goddesses, by the way.
Well, Stops, I think you can, if there's a big if here, if you have certain goals, and somebody in the chat pointed out, right, Sam Harris went with that view, and I was along with that for quite some time, and I changed my mind on it being an objective starting point, rather a subjective starting point, but then an objective methodology thereafter. So you could, but then you have to present a goal firstly. So if the goal is well-being, then science can demonstrate what is better, because you've already said, okay, what I want is well-being, human well-being to be my moral standard. Well, how do we find out what that is? We use a method to show us whether something contributes to or takes away from well-being. How do we do that? Through the scientific method. But you need certain presuppositions to get you off the ground.
conditioning. This would mean that different conditioning would result in different moral standards. If we were to say that morals are based on our physical conditions, then that would mean that morals are subjective.
Yes, it would. And that's why they are. Yeah.
This contradicts the fact that some morals are undeniably objective.
It does not contradict the fact. You know,
It's very interesting. Okay, I don't want to get us too sidetracked. I was actually listening to somebody today, as it happens. I haven't been listening to much philosophy and theology recently. I've been much more busy working, but I happened to listen to it today, and it depends what people mean. If it's mind dependent, then it's subjective. It's mind independent, you could say it's objective. The problem with saying that it's mind independent means that that would include God's mind, because what makes God's mind, or Allah's mind in this case, something special? Now the Muslim apologist would have to say, okay, it's not just God's mind, it's X, Y, and Z, and that's a very difficult argument to make. So either you go with the view that if it's mind dependent, then it's subjective, and that would include God's mind. Or if you want to try and do a special pleading on God's mind, good luck with that. Or you say it's mind independent, in which case that would rule out God. Or again, you'd have to have special pleading or some other argument as to why God's mind is somehow not part of this equation.
okay, and if you lay the foundation that there are some things which are objectively, in other words, mind independently correct or moral, and then there are subjective ones, there is no contradiction there, because
I think
you can say that a car, for example, can run with closed doors and it can run with open doors. There's no contradiction there. Both are possible at the same time, and you can have a 2-seater and a 4-seater. So this does not contradict cars as such. So the objective, and this is the old example which I was bringing, it is objectively moral not to torture babies for fun. Okay, so this is one example. There's a lot of things, there's rape and a lot of things, which are objective, which are mind, I think, independent. But then
I think
what happens afterwards, then it becomes subjective.
I think that the challenge that might come up with that stops is that we know that humans have done these things. So what you're really then appealing to, or what somebody then really means by objective, is really an appeal to popularity. Most people believe that this is wrong, because there have been people that have tortured babies or done the most horrific things that we can think of. So it's not the case that that it's objective in the sense that it's independent of a mind, because certain minds have done certain of these unspeakable things to other humans. So it seems to me,
Okay, that's a good caveat. Yeah, okay.
that
I
one would
accept
have
that.
to say what I mean by objective is, what most people believe. But, I don't think that I'm certainly not going to accept that as objective. I'm not going to take that as objective. If it's mind independent, that means that it would be the case that it is wrong, and everybody would not only believe this, but in fact act in that way. I'm not of the view that, to me at least, that the ad populum would work in the objective case. And that's why when I speak about morals now, I don't talk about objective and subjective, because it just goes into the weeds here. I don't think it's
That's
very
also
helpful.
true.
Even if we go with a mind-dependent or independent thing, I think I'm quite happy to accept that it's subjective. I think the objective mind-independent thing is a very difficult bar to get through, unless you're going to have certain presuppositions. If you take it the case, whatever. But even in the Muslim case, if they take that God he's got some special mind, that mind can bring forth objective morality. Well, how do you know that it's objective? Is it just because of God? What is it that makes it objective? Because now you're not saying mind independent, you're saying independent of human minds. Okay, but if aliens came down and and they were more advanced than us and they provided us with morality, would you then grant that is objective? No, the Muslim wouldn't accept that. So what they really mean is it's independent of any mind in the universe, and it's dependent on the God mind or the Allah's mind. And in which case, how do you know that? How do you know
Exactly.
that is objective? Because it could be objectively bad. If your standard is simply that it comes from the mind of God and therefore it's objective, well, I'm not going to accept that, especially if we're going to start with what do you mean by subjective and objective. If objective is mind independent, now you have to make an argument for why that does not include Allah's mind. So maybe it's something I'll take up, especially taking it from that position, because I heard it in that way recently. So maybe I'll take that up with some Muslims that are a little bit more knowledgeable on this, if there are any, and see how they try to respond to that.
Yeah, but then it becomes a vacuous claim.
Yeah, that's why I don't like the objective and
Yeah.
subjective thing. I think
Okay, I can see that, and I think I will also change, because up until now I've always said, yeah, there are both. There's this minimum foundation, and then the rest is subjective. But I think even the minimum foundation is wobbly, because
It's more
there
an
are
appeal to-
always
yeah,
crazy
yeah.
people. And the scientific method can be used to observe consciousness, because consciousness is self-awareness, for example. And if a baby can see a red spot on the forehead, that's consciousness.
I think we have to presuppose that. I'm not sure that science can demonstrate it, because in order for it to work, you need to be conscious to begin with. So you have a presupposition that you are conscious. To me, that's a self-attesting presupposition or axiom. In order
No,
for
but-
us to do anything, we need to be conscious. That anything in the sense that that is rational, we have to be conscious. An unconscious person couldn't do that, or somebody that has no consciousness, not unconscious, non-conscious, I guess I would say.
That is why I use that example, because this helps you see it. So it's a demonstration. All right.
such as unjust killing, rape, theft, and so on. If one takes the position that our moral standards are a result of physical biological conditioning, then this would make our moral values meaningless, because our
No,
No,
they're
it
not
wouldn't make it
meaningless.
That's utter nonsense.
It just enables the cooperation and coexistence of human beings.
moral values could have been a lot different if we were conditioned differently. Now back to the how argument.
Well, that's true. Stop there for a moment, Stops. If we were the case, and I've made this myself, but then you wouldn't be talking about something that's human. If it were the case that we were like Colossus, or a combination of Colossus and Wolverine, that we couldn't in any way feel pain, suffer, or have pleasure, if we didn't have that ability, if we were machines, then I think that the term morality would be meaningless. So it would be in context of it being a human. But if it was something that was non-human or not human, or that couldn't feel pain and suffering, then I don't think that the term morality would be a vacuous term. What would it mean for something that couldn't suffer or couldn't feel pleasure to have morals? What would that mean? To me, that's incomprehensible. I could be wrong, but it seems incomprehensible to me.
If we were to take the example of a mum baking a cake for her children, and when they come to eat it, one of them asks, "Why has our mother baked this cake?" Science cannot do much to answer this question. By employing scientific
Of course,
methods,
stop there
we
again. So of course, science could give you an explanation of the cause and effect that's happened in order for that cake to be baked, especially if you're a determinist.
Yes.
And it could even give you an answer if you were not a determinist or a compatibilist or even libertarian. It could say to you, hey, it was a random thought that entered your mind, or hey, it was this past action and this thing, or you did this last year. And it could rationalize in some way. You could use that method, because science isn't just about being in a lab, right? Science incorporates a whole bunch of disciplines. So science could give you a why. Is it the why? Well, how do you know what the why is?
The other thing is you can always measure the output generated in the recipient. So there's definitely ways of measuring it.
It could give you a why. That's the thing. I don't know how you would determine that it's the why. It could give you an explanation for why the mother baked the
Yeah,
cake.
different options, yeah.
given data such as the ingredients, the oven temperature, and hypothesize how she made the cake. But this does not explain why she made the cake. This example helps us understand that science tells us the what and the how, but it does not give us the why.
And it doesn't have to. I don't understand why they harp on about the why. Yes, there are indications that you can also find out the why, but why is the why so interesting?
The why is interesting from the Muslim apologist point of view, because if God is or the Allah in the Muslim case is the intercessor or the creator, then there's a teleological purpose for everything. Because you said it earlier, right, on the show, everything has a purpose. And if there isn't a purpose, then the Muslim brain goes, well, that's not comprehensible. Everything must have, because they're starting with a presupposition that everything has a purpose. And therefore, in their mind, it's a legitimate question to ask a teleological why on everything. Whereas you and I would go, no, we don't have to ask a teleological why on everything.
Yeah. And there's a discussion which I don't understand in the chat about dreams. Now, the scientific method is a process. So the scientific method can't be used for anything to discover anything, because the discovery is just one component of the scientific method. So I think there's a bit of a I don't know, miscommunication going on here. You can analyze dreams from the outside. You can see the differences in the dream intensity, but that's it. You cannot record the dream itself. Definitely not. We don't have the machines to do that yet. The technical equipment. I'm sure one day we will. But you can already start doing the first baby steps in the direction of analyzing dreams. Yes. So where's your problem with that? Why are you so stuck on somehow finding limits in the scientific community? I don't understand that.
It does not give us the purpose behind physical phenomena that occur in our world. This leads atheists to inherit the false assumption that purpose, as we know it, simply does not exist.
Okay, that's again sort of not a good statement, right? Because there is, and for those that haven't heard it, there's two terms here. One is teleological, i.e. that it comes from a mind and has a purpose. The other is teleonomic, and that is a quote-unquote design through natural processes. And the purpose of the design is simply, if somebody asks, what's the purpose of the teleonomic design, one could say the purpose is the way that the forces operate. Now, that might not be particularly appealing or
helpful,
a full answer for a Muslim, but there is something called teleonomic design, right, as opposed to teleological design or teleological purpose.
That's crazy. Anyway, I say a toaster has a purpose, not a human. I have challenges, I have satisfaction, I have accomplishment, I have all sorts of things, but I don't have a purpose. I'll leave that for a toaster.
To say that there's no purpose or that it quite simply does not exist is unreasonable, as it contradicts most of our day-to-day reasoning. Imagine watching a film where a character works towards a goal throughout the entirety of its runtime, and then at the end the character is told that his actions don't mean anything and that there is no goal. Any person would come to the conclusion that this would be a terrible idea for a movie and that it wouldn't make any sense.
No. Excuse me, what are you talking about? This is reality. This happens again and again and again. I mean, if I go and want to investigate something, I can spend 10 years on this, and in the end I find out, no, I was barking up the wrong tree. I was wrong. But the point is, at least I have shown that this is the wrong way. And others can learn from this and find other ways and maybe discover the right way. So this is not terrible. And I don't think that these people understand that a lack of success in science is not always a negative or terrible thing. And this is quite strange that these people say, this is so terrible if you find at the end of the day there was nothing. You know, this is leading up to, you lead all your life and then you find out that you simply die. And the Muslim thinks you lead all your life, but then there's an afterlife. So there is a reason why you had the life. And then there is this much higher level being that you're going to be in the after.
Everything that was presented in the film wouldn't have any significant meaning. We live in a time where tradition...
Stop there for a moment. Or the best the Muslim can get away with here is saying that it's disagreeable. There's no contradiction there. The fact that there may not be a cosmic meaning doesn't mean that every human cannot give their life meaning. Now, if that's disagreeable to a Muslim, that's fine. They can say that's disagreeable. But you notice what he said. In the words, there's no meaning, but he said no significant meaning. Well, who decides what a significant meaning is? What he really has to argue for is that there's no cosmic meaning, because who decides what that is? I can say that there's significant meaning. I have a family. I've left the world a better place than when I started. For me, that's a significant meaning. And what is his? How can he possibly counter me, other than saying, "Hey, unless he can provide a standard by which we can evaluate what quote significant meaning means?" Because no meaning in relation to what? The only way he could make that argument to say that there's no meaning is to say, okay, well, the only way that there could be meaning is if there was a cosmic meaning, which would mean that there is Allah as the creator, and then he'd have to go through why that's the case. So there's a lot of burden on him here. But if you notice, there's two words there, and he said three. And significant is entirely subjective unless you can provide a methodology. Because I can claim to have meaning, so can you, Thunderous. Everybody could claim to have meaning. And if a Muslim came along and said, well, it's no significant meaning, I'm going to say, by what standard? And if you're going to say by God, I'm going to say, well, firstly, you've got to demonstrate that your God exists. And then why should I take that seriously? Why should I take what your God says as being significant? And how do you even know what that is? Because your book is so convoluted and unclear that even you aren't certain of what this quote-unquote significant meaning is.
Thunderous, you've been quiet. Are we ignoring you, or are you just quietly enjoying the show?
I've obviously, with reference to you guys, I have a different point of view. I obviously subscribe to intelligent design, so a discussion for another time, perhaps, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Traditional worldviews are heavily scrutinized, and scientific theories are taken as scientific fact and absolute. However, any sincere scientist can tell.
Stop there. I think
Yeah,
Stanley wanted to say something.
when you guys are talking about philosophy and the philosophical style of understanding, I totally agree with you guys. I don't think philosophy should be applied in all these things. It either is or it isn't. It's down to for me. It's down to the interpretation of the evidence. The evidence is exactly the same for you guys as it is for me. I interpret it one way. You guys interpret it another. I don't need the philosophical understanding of any of these things. Philosophy could teach me how beautiful a flower is, but philosophy won't tell me where a flower's come from. That's where I stand.
Okay.
I guess the question, though, Thunderous, which is an interesting one, is if let's, whatever it is, whatever the topic is, let's use Muslims rather than yourself, but is the Muslims have a particular view and the rest of us don't? So the three of us, for example, don't think that it's the case that Muhammad heard Jibril in the cave. One of us is right and one of us is wrong. There is only those two options. And then, as you say, there would be evidence that would be weighted one way or the other that would more likely point to one of those being the case, because none of us were around. So we have to use our inferences. We have to use whatever evidence there is and then come to a conclusion based on that, right?
Sure, it's a process of elimination for me. So I'm coming from a different angle with reference to Muhammad, as to whether he met the angel Gabriel in the cave. You're coming from the point your atheist point of view and angles. I'll come from not just from an intelligent design point of view, but I'll come with it from previous scripture as well. Which is, if you go back to when we first started the discussion several years ago, is that I use the analogy of the sawn-off shotgun. It's got both barrels. So atheism will be one barrel, which is to knock down Islam. I'll come with the intelligent design and previous revelation of scripture as the other barrel, to look at that situation in the cave as to whether not only can it be real in one perspective, but it's not real in the other perspective either.
Stops, can you just go back like 10 seconds? Because
Yeah,
you said something was profoundly
with the
wrong.
mouse, yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Taken as scientific fact and absolute.
There we
However,
go.
any sincere scientist can tell.
That statement there, taken as scientific fact and absolute. Again, I don't know anybody that's literate on either in science or philosophy that makes that claim. Lay people would say that, but if you asked them and we all got a bit more educated, we wouldn't say it's quote unquote absolute and a scientific fact, because there's I think very powerful arguments against quote absolute. Presumably he means like an epistemic absolute, and that a scientific fact. What do you mean by a fact? Well, what do you mean by a scientific fact rather than a fact? And so there's a more nuanced discussion here. So if somebody says, well, yeah, it's absolute and a scientific fact, whether it was an atheist or a theist, one could then counter that. So I don't know anybody that's literate on that makes those claims. I think it's mostly people who haven't studied any of those things that say that, maybe like an Ali Dawah or whatever the case may be, who's pretty much a simpleton. But anybody else, they would find that, because they probably know that would short circuit if they try to argue that view. But if you're illiterate like Ali Dawah and others, then you might try and make that view because you just don't know any better.
Of any significant meaning. We live in a time where traditional worldviews are heavily scrutinized and scientific theories are taken as scientific fact and absolute.
Yeah, okay.
However, any sincere scientist can tell you that science can help us understand how the world works and stop at that.
Hang on. This guy, okay, this is so terrible. He's a Christian who won the Templeton Award. Now, does everybody know Templeton? This is Templeton Foundation is somebody, the guy got rich and he is donating $60 million every single year for somebody to prove that God exists. And the Templeton Prize, which is what this Dr. Gleiser got, is awarded to somebody who made a significant contribution towards understanding of God. So the Muslims here are borrowing from Christian apologists.
That
Nothing new there.
Muslims shouldn't
Yeah, they do that a lot. And I guess,
Don't
again,
feel
one would
pressure.
have to ask him, what do you mean by science has limits? Do you mean that it's limited in principle of not investigating God directly? I'd grant you that. Are you meaning that in principle it's limited to investigating something in the natural world? That I wouldn't grant you without an argument. So what does it mean to say it has limits? I'd want to
Well-
understand what does a human mean by when they say that?
Rob, what can they do? They can only try and make you doubt. Okay, because this is why they said the belief in science is absolute, and therefore you need to be shown that there are limits in science. So you can't trust science. You need to trust the Quran.
But
science.
but again, even if there was a articulate, knowledgeable Muslim, right? They would take. Well, I hope they would take issue, because Christians would. I hope that a Muslim would take issue with something like that.
pressured to accept scientific conclusions as fact. As Muslims, we shouldn't assume we know everything with our limited human knowledge. Instead, we should remember that ultimate knowledge lies with Allah, Al-Alim, the all-knowing. Muslims shouldn't feel pressured to believe in what mainstream thinkers, atheists, and scientists say what is and isn't true. Science is a
By the way,
Okay.
if anybody wants to spend time on science, go and spend 2 hours watching this show.
Okay, but stops at that point there. Okay, he's acknowledging that that Muslims don't know everything, but then they also have a book that claims to be complete, concise, and error-free. In which case, they have got a method, and if they can't interpret that, whose fault is that? That can't be humans' fault, because humans are fallible. So God has intentionally made, Allah's intentionally made humans fallible. It's like there's a bug in the system, and then the question is, okay, in order to quote know something, you can't have a bug. Well, that's not possible since humans are fallible. And so when they say don't put quote unquote faith, you would want to trust the best reliable information. And so even other Muslims will contradict this, because if I asked, let's say Hamza Torts or whatever, what does science say about X or Y? Now, if it contradicts him, he's obviously going to be a very he's not going to commit himself. But if it's something that he thinks is pretty much a certainty, or as close to a certainty as it can be, and it doesn't contradict the Quran, well, then he's going to say, yes, we should accept science as the best explanation for, heliocentrism, for example, because that, in his mind, that doesn't contradict the Quran. Obviously, for you and I, and I'm sure Thunderous, we think that it clearly shows geocentrism. In other words, the sun orbiting the Earth. But if he thought the opposite, what else are they going to appeal to for the best understanding of the world around him? Are they
Yeah,
going
but
to
now
appeal to
they've
the
got
Quran?
30 seconds left, so they
on.
need to start the preaching. But I'm still looking this Radich. Listen, I don't understand.
Bring him onto Discord, Stops. Let's chat with him on Discord.
Just
Invite
tell
him to
me
Discord.
how this perfect science makes... There is no perfect science. And the science cannot observe your dreams literally. Why are you still on this topic? I don't know what's wrong with you. What are you expecting? What is it that you actually are getting out of this conversation? What will make you happy? I don't
Let's ask him on
understand this.
Discord. There's the Discord link. We'll put the banner up as well. You can join us on Discord afterwards if you're if you're going after that. Go for it, Stops.
wonderful endeavor, and more Muslims should partake in it just as those Muslims did in the past.
And that's interesting. So they are saying, listen, go and investigate. And not what the Quran says, which is what the Quran says. The Quran says, go and use your akal, your intellect, your everything, but only to investigate the Quran. So they are saying, no, go outside the Quran and investigate nature.
Yeah, by all means, come and
However-
talk to us in Discord about this claim of yours. But yeah, so
Science is
that
not
seems
weak.
that's
I don't know what is wrong with this guy.
yeah. We'll talk to him afterwards, Stops. But
Its
if they're saying you
conclusions
are
should-
supposed to investigate the world, well, what methodology are you going to use to investigate the world around you?
Yeah, okay. Anything that does not contradict the Quran, this is the problem. This is the limitation.
not be treated as the ultimate everlasting truth, and we must recognize that it cannot answer all our questions, nor can it be used to disprove the existence of God.
Well, that depends on what
doesn't claim
your
to,
criteria is for proof and disproof, right?
That's it. That's it.
Cool. Thanks for that.
Anyway, I thought this was interesting, and I thought this shows a couple of different tactics, and it shows a couple of different things, which I thought would be interesting. And I've got a similar one for next week. So it's amazing how you can spend so much time spending, just talking about one single 5-minute video. But
I
there's
think the other
plenty of
thing that you
material. So
noted
if we're going
that-
in 3 weeks, going to be talking about Shias, what we might be doing is spending more time on this, because I think this is very, very interesting.
I think that also to bring in Thunderous, right? We see it a lot, right? Muslim apologists are borrowing Christian ideas because they don't
Well,
have
I've-
strong ones of their own, so that they're always trying to borrow when they think that they've got a similar argument against an atheist, for example. But then they'll turn on the Christian the moment they don't. So they borrow. It's
But I mean, I know Stops' sister. She's a Jehovah's Witness, and I did some research on Jehovah's Witnesses, and I found that the arguments used by Muslims against the Trinity are plagiarized from Jehovah's Witnesses. And one of the funniest examples of that that Muslims use is they use the 1 + 1 + 1 = 1. And then I found that Jehovah's Witnesses published an article in 1953 in a tract about the Trinity, divine mystery or pagan myth, which is where they get the illustration from. Then Stops several years ago did one of William Lane Craig and Hamza Sorts, basically almost word for word. And was it the mannerisms as well, Stops?
Yeah.
Where Hamza Sorts
And the numbers.
and mimicked William Lane Craig. So all her arguments are actually plagiarized from other sources, Christian sources, and then obviously, like you say, they turn on the Christians. It's a bit like an England football match when they go abroad. They'll fight the Germans. When they've beaten up the Germans, the West Ham will start fighting Chelsea. It's pretty much what they're like.
All right, ladies, gents, and others, if you want to continue, then please come see us on Discord. I will now close with the Hadith of the week. Are there any open questions? Is there anything that you want to discuss? We're a little bit over time, but I love this topic, really. I think this is so wonderful. It's so, there's so much material here, and this is being used so much. So I think anybody can benefit from this if he ever talks to a Muslim. Are there any other questions? No, I don't see anything here. All right, then what we'll do is we'll go to the Hadith of the day. And today I've selected, you can see I've done all my homework this week, eh? Both. I've done the Quran, I've done the Hadith, I've done everything. And I've got, oh, by the way, Smile shows Lady Gaga and her arms. Okay, Smile is a channel, and they show Lady Gaga and her arms, but the arms, as well, even the elbows, are blackened out. Oh, this is so funny. Okay, Bukhari, Volume 9, Book 87, and you're going to get 2 for the price of 1 because you're going to get numbers 123 and 124. Very similar, very short, so get ready, buckle up, and this is it. And this is narrated by Anas. The Prophet said, whoever, and this is now like by coincidence, of course, into the topic, whoever has seen me in a dream, then no doubt he has seen me, for Satan cannot imitate my shape. And number 124 says, this one is narrated by Abu Qatada. The Prophet said, a good dream is from Allah, and a bad dream is from Satan. Who would have thought? So whoever has seen in a dream something he dislikes, then he should spit without saliva 3 times on his left and seek refuge with Allah from Satan, for it will not harm him, and Satan cannot appear in my shape. Oh, goodness. This is so scientifically accurate. It's absolutely amazing. Oh, goodness. All right, beautiful people. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure tonight. I'm very happy that I can almost speak normal again. And we shall see you next Friday, where we're still going to be talking about the different Dawah in action tactics and processes and whatever things. So we're still going to be talking next week about this. All right. If anybody wants to contribute, please feel free to do so. See you next week, guys. Bye bye.
Good night.
Bye bye.